There we go. Hello, everybody. This is Hyperwave, and with me today is the beautiful Socrates. Uh, Leah is getting ready to jump on a plane, but Socrates understands all of this stuff. It's a good thing I'm not having to do it. And today we're going to talk about Seljen trading system again, part two. We didn't have a lot of time. We'll try to keep this under an hour, but what we're going to do is give you some more examples and just a discussion between Socrates and myself of what he's finding, what I'm finding, why we think it's so important at this point in time to be talking about looking for tops and bottoms. The stock market's down 400 points today. There's a question, is this thing rolling over? We've got some very strange things happening in the currencies, some very strange things happening in the FANG stocks, in the chip stocks, all kinds of cross currents here. And what better tool is there than something that can identify tops and bottoms, sometimes right to the tick? It's very scary. Today, I'm going to look at three particular things: Amazon, Newmont Mining, and Qualcomm. To give you a little historical perspective, Qualcomm is a recent broadening top, or Megaphone, or Seljen trading system. And we just want, again, to get you to be able to identify these things and start looking for them yourself. Believe me, you are going to find huge numbers right now for whatever reason, and on some very big indexes, as well as many, many different stocks, currencies, even in some of the precious metals markets. I've noticed some things. This isn't about giving advice about trading any of these things. What we're trying to do is lay the groundwork for a third proprietary trading system that I have used for many, many years. They were all designed about the same 2 or 3 year period back in the 1970s. The Consensio really didn't come along until the late 1980s, early 1990s. But both the Seljen system and Hyperwave were developed a number of years before that, back in the late 1970s. And I've used it, as we've said, ad nauseum in all kinds of markets under all kinds of conditions. But there's no better time to be understanding this than what we might be facing, which is a global macroeconomic shift of unprecedented proportions. We've tried to define that in a bunch of our vlogs and our Medium articles. Yes, Bitcoin is an important part of it. Yes, the crypto market is fun and interesting. But what we're talking about with these systems are systems that can be used across all asset classes for doing different things. None of the three do the same thing, but all give you another piece to the puzzle. And so we've sort of debated it for a long time, but we came to the conclusion that teaching the Seljen trading system in great detail was very timely. We've gotten a lot of response by people saying, why did you move it up from Thursday to a week from Saturday, June the 1st? And because it looks to a lot of people looking at this thing like, oh my gosh, there's big things happening. We need to know how to use it, how to use stops and all that sort of thing. But the best we could do right now is to put this thing together for June the 1st, 4-hour webinar, 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock. You can sign up at our lucidinvestmentstrategies.com website. But before we get to that day, what we're telling people is please Google Megaphone pattern, Google broadening top or broadening bottom. Look at all the examples they give you and just begin picturing what we're talking about here. before we all get together on the webinar, where we're going to be able to go into great detail about a lot of current ones, a lot of historical ones, and introduce the idea of how you trade them, how you place stops, what to look out for, what to look for. But that's a process. So what we're going to try to do is keep coming in with these vlogs and add a little bit each time to our description of what we're talking about. So welcome, Socrates. Thank you for all the work. Thank you for setting all this up. And I believe that you are going to look at a couple of different ways of looking at currencies at the current time with Seljen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I would be more than happy to get started out, have a few charts prepared that I find very interesting that we can go ahead and take a look at here. I'm going to go ahead and throw it on screen share. So the first one that I wanted to examine is the EURUSD pair, which is going to be the primary currency pair basically traded throughout the world. So this is what a lot of people will be looking at to determine whether or not the US dollar is bullish or bearish. Often they will be referring to it against the euro. So this is definitely a very important chart. It's a very important pair, and it's a very long time frame. We're looking at the monthly chart, and this thing is painting a pretty beautiful kind of broadening top pattern. And again, seeing this big sell-off before this broadening pattern would make many people want to think that this is a bottom, especially if all that you use is the kind of pattern of drawing a couple trend lines. You may be inclined to think that this is a bottoming pattern because it followed this major sell-off of about 30% there or so in less than a year. I wish this went back a little bit further, but that's okay. But it's not. This is a topping pattern because we have the 1, 3, and the 5 on top. So we've got the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 when Tyler was showing can be beneficial to start with the last number in the sequence. This can help to get the counts down opposed to starting over here. It can be a little bit more murky. So here we start with this one. Number 5, we notice that this middle candle is above the 2 to the side of it, and I do want to clarify that that is the wick that we are looking at. Seljen is most concerned with the highs and the lows of the candle, or what could be called the wick, opposed to the close. So we notice this one closed down here, but what we're really concerned with is the wick, and it's up here in the middle of 2 lower highs. Got the same thing down here, a low in between 2 higher lows. Same thing for 3, 2, and 1. So that is the broadening top pattern, and kind of like Tyler mentioned, how can this really be a top? Well, the low is down here around 1.03 or so. So this thing has rallied 20% in a year. So looking for a top after that sort of rally is definitely well within reason. And if this does turn out to be the top in the in the euro US dollar pair, then this system would have caught it. Like Tyler said, it can get it basically down to the pip, and that is kind of what we're seeing here. If this does turn out to be the eventual top, and it does keep trending down and even take out these lows, then we'll notice that Seljen gave a sell signal right up in here after these 3 candles closed. So after that occurred here, we've got the Seljen sell signal, which is occurring very, very near the peak. And most systems are not really going to try to get the very top or bottom. Almost all trading systems will want to wait for further confirmation before really expecting a reversal or entering into a newly established trend or exiting out of one that looks like it just exhausted. So that is kind of one of the most amazing things about this system, is that it can actually go for the tops down to the candle, basically. And that's something that I find fascinating.
Keep that up just for a second, if you don't mind.
Go right ahead.
I didn't realize this when Socrates first showed it to me. Obviously, we're also going to look at basically the reciprocal of this. We're going to look at the US dollar. But for now, here is a very interesting thing that you will find from time to time. If you now put a 5 below the 4,
A 5 below the 4.
yeah, if you can move the chart up a little bit so you can squeeze in 5, maybe a red 5.
Let's see here. That one is actually just a screenshot. So
Oh, I see. That's okay. I can just explain it, and then we can build it on another one. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that Seljen also picked the bottom of this move in 2017 perfectly. And the way you do that is you put a 5 where the 4 is, you put a 4 where the 3 is, you put a 3 where the 2 is, you put a 2 where the 1 is, and then 3 candles over to the left, you put a 1. And now you've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Seljen bottom that perfectly picked the bottom of the move that had started all the way to the left of the chart. And you got a Seljen buy signal right off of that all the way up to the top. And then we're able to get out of both trades, making money in both directions. And over again, you're going to find that quality. You have to look for it and think about what it's saying. But it's remarkable that Socrates happened to pull up a chart where it works perfectly.
Yeah, that certainly is, and I did not catch that myself. So I'm glad that you pointed that out. I'm just putting up the numbers so that everybody is clear on what we're looking at. So we've got the 2 here, and then the 1 occurred right in, let's see here, that 1 would have been...
Right. It looks like it's right next. No, right next to the 2. Does that work?
Yeah, this one works as a 1 right here.
Yeah.
So
okay. So now zoom out on it, make it a larger chart. The other way. There you go. Okay. Look how far this thing fell. We haven't looked yet to see, but I'll do it real quickly. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Believe it or not, there is a 5 Seljen at the top at $160, 1.60. There's a 5 there. There's a 4 down in 2006. There's a 3 up at the top in 2005. There's a 2 between 2004 and 2005, and there's a 1 to the left of that. So here are 3 Seljen signals in a row catching the largest moves of the euro over the last 10 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the top. At the bottom, you've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, giving you that nice bounce. And does that one work? Yeah, that works.
All right, so yeah, just highlighting those real quick, and then here is the 5 that we just got that we went over on the initial chart there.
Exactly.
So just to give you an idea how well that has been working here, it absolutely caught the top all the way down to the bottom, and that is what is that, an 9-year move there, where you're out at the very top, and you're back in here.
Now
Out
we'll show you how the stops work. I can just visualize already that the stops would have gotten you out on that very top 5, and very possibly there would be other entry points. But then on the next 5 to the right, the one we just looked at, that bottom, I can see that stop would have gone out and gotten you out with a very nice profit on that trade too. So we're not going to go into stops today, but we are going to do that probably on our next vlog. We want everybody to understand all the parts of this thing before we go into great detail. But that's terrific. Thanks for those. How about taking a look at the dollar?
Absolutely, my pleasure. One thing I just wanted to point out that is a reason why I've been interested in currencies, especially in the upcoming year or two, is that many of them have been painting these enormous patterns that have been starting in either 2000 or around 2008. And we see the EURUSD is in this 18-year sort of symmetrical triangle. And once one of these trend lines breaks, I'm really expecting some huge volatility. I mean, if you're going to take that measured move from the symmetrical triangle, you're looking at like a 60% sort of move one direction or the other. So having a system like this that's kind of could potentially get you into a trade, into a high probability trade before the pattern breaks, that is very interesting to me, in the sense that I'm used to considering patterns a no trade zone, and waiting for them to break one way or the other before I'm really interested in entering. So I have had alerts set on both of these trend lines. I've been waiting patiently for one of them to break, and then after learning Seljen, I decided to go ahead and take a look here, and sure enough, it potentially could have got me into a position well before this pattern broke. So something to keep in mind. Maybe take a look at the US dollar and versus the Japanese yen is another that's got an enormous pattern that it's been consolidating in. So definitely, like Tyler said at the beginning, we're on the verge of some monumental shifts, and potentially already feeling the first tremors of that. So here we've got the DXY, which is going to be in a very much an inverse of the EuroUSD. The euro is going to make up the lion's share of this pair. It's basically the dollar against the euro and the Japanese yen and a couple of others. Those are the primary. So seeing a broadening top in the euro led me to believe that there would be a broadening bottom in the DXY, and sure enough, that is what we're seeing. We're getting another beautiful big pattern here. That's this one has been forming since 2015, this broadening bottom, and a rule of thumb that I have is that the longer a pattern forms, the more reliable it will be. The shorter patterns tend to have a lot more fake outs and not reach their targets as often as patterns that have really been forming over a very long time. So seeing this broadening bottom occur over, not only is it on the monthly chart, but it's also been forming for such a long time, to me that's much more significant than one that has just taken, say, a year to form. So this is definitely a very important chart as far as I'm concerned. And again, we see right here, we've got the 5 with this low here. We got the 4 up here, the 3, the 2. All of those are rather obvious. The 1 is maybe this candle. What do you think, Tyler? Would you put the 1 here?
You could put it there. and it really doesn't matter as long as you can identify a one. Either one of those. I guess I lean to the one that's closest to the two, and that one is clearly lower. I guess I like the other one better because it's also, well, no, we'll talk about that at the webinar. That's a very good point. Both of those qualify. One of them, the one where the pointer is right now, has not only lower lows, but only one lower high, which doesn't matter so much. It's higher than the one to the left, whereas the red one with the one under it now is lower than both the one on its right and left, but it's also higher than the one on its right and its left. And we will talk about that in detail. They both work. The only rule is that on a one, the lows of the candle to the left and the right must be higher. On a two, the highs to the candles to the left and the right must be lower, etc. But there's some interpretation in terms of the entire candle, in terms of the highs and the lows. It does not change the rules, but it might change the outcome. I want to do some more work on that before I change with maybe a corollary if you've got two candles to pick from. Now, the question is, what does it matter? The answer is, it does not. As long as they qualify, then that 5 is a valid 5, and that's the end of the down move. And the only thing that our stop program does is it goes off the 5. It doesn't go off the 4, the 3, the 2, the 1. It doesn't matter if they're right next to each other or spread out over 5 years. Once you get a valid 5 with no intervening things that screw up the count, that's all you need. That's why I say it's so simple. But as with everything, there's always things to consider, questions we will have or you will have. What happens if you get, let's just assume for a second, at that 5 that the red candle to the left of it was exactly the same low? Would that qualify? Well, what I would do in that case is I would go to a weekly chart. This is a monthly, right? Yeah.
Yep.
I would go to a weekly chart and see if any of the weekly candles in that 4-week period gave me a lower low on either the green or the red, in which case I would take the one with the lower weekly within the monthly. That's why the time period doesn't really matter, but I've chosen the weekly to be where I do my analysis. But very often you can find on the monthly the basic pattern, and then you go down to the weekly to fine tune it. And then if you have to, you can even go down lower than that to say a daily, to see in a 5-day week which of the candles was the lowest between this week and the week before it. And whatever ends up having the lowest low is the candle you want to mark as your 5. So in this case, it's very clear. The green is lower than the red to the left of it. Therefore, there's no more questions. I was just posing that as the type of thing that might come up that will confuse people. So that's a great example.
Absolutely. And one thing to go over here real quick is an example of where the system would not have necessarily worked as you would have wanted, and that would be right in this area here, where we see this was a qualified 5. If we just take away the rest of the action that happened over here, and let's just pretend that this is the day we're living in, right in here, and that would have been like the fall in September or October of 2017. So let's just pretend that this is where we're at, and we have just gotten this 4, and then we've just fallen below the 3, and then we've gotten a low on a higher low and a higher low. So this would be signaling a confirmed 5 right here. So you'd be potentially looking to enter in this range, and you would get stopped out down in here right before it moved in your favor, and you would be kind of re-entering after getting chopped out. So that is an example of when you would have a 5, and now a new low gets created without it coming to make a new high. So now what do? Is we just take the 5 that was here. Now that is no longer valid. We move it over here once we get a new 5. That's why we use stop losses and are always sure to manage risk properly, such that when it does move against, we know exactly what we're doing, exactly where we're getting out. And then when another 3 candle pattern here does form, then we can look to, we would just move this 5 down to here, and we could look to re-enter at that point. So those were the charts that I wanted to go over. It sounds like you've got a couple yourself, Tyler.
Yeah, I've got a couple of interesting ones to me. I hope everybody else finds them interesting. I think you will. So what I will do is, ooh, don't push that button. I almost pushed the button like I did yesterday that stopped the broadcast. I will keep my hands to myself. Okay, so what I will do is I'll go boom, bada, boom, bada. Got to say the magic words or it doesn't work. And then get out of this silly thing. Seems like there's too many steps. Okay, here we go. We're going to start with Amazon. Look at the dates. This is 2006. The stock market's going up in 2006. This is 2007. The stock market's going up in 2007, but Amazon's been coming down. This is before the 07, 08, 09 crisis. And we get a beautiful 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 bottom. And it is the lowest candle from this top. And just to give you a little perspective, we had a much higher top over here. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to show you another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, this one occurred, this is Amazon, the same Amazon we've got today. This is in the 2001-2-3 bear market. And Amazon at the time dropped from $110 down to $10. Brutal. As you know, all the NASDAQ stocks and tech stocks got killed, but Amazon really did. This is Amazon at $10 a share, basically. And lo and behold, right at the very, 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 very bottom is a 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we get a run from $5.58. Yes, Amazon, $5.58. It's 1,820 today. And you catch the bottom. But then 2003, 4, 5, Greenspan brings interest rates down to 0. The mortgage market starts going crazy. The stock market's going up, going up. And Amazon runs from that $5 level all the way up to $60. Now, this is in 03 and 04. It's been running. The market bottomed in March of 2003. This is where the bottom of the market was. We run up from $5 to $60. That's 24x, by the way. I'm sure you know that. And then this weird thing happens. Amazon peaks in late October of 2003. The stock market is just getting going. 2004, 2005, 2006, the stock market is going up and Amazon is going down. And right at the very bottom of the Amazon dropping while the stock market's going up, we get a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 buy signal using Seljen. This time we're buying it at about 25 bucks. And look what happens to it. We go from 25 bucks up to 100 on this peak. A 4x move again. But off of the bottom. Not in between, not using Consensio that gets you in after a 10% move. No hyperwave here at this point, so no way to get in. Sequential did get a 9 right here at the bottom. Sequential is a great tool to use with this one. But I wanted to show you that because the bear market had not begun yet. The bear market starts up here. I just did quickly try to find a 5 at the top. I didn't take too much time. There might be one up there. But in any case, after going up to 100, we drop back to 25, a full round trip from that last buy. And now we're still at 40 bucks a share. Remember what, I mean, you know as well as I do what happens to Amazon. This is what happens to Amazon. Just keeps going and going and going and going and going and going and going. It's still going and on and on and on. 2015, you can't even keep up. You've got to go to log scale, but I won't do it because I don't like log scale. So the important thing is historically as well as current time, this is a great tool to apply when you start getting nervous about a bottom or a top. Okay, I want to show you another one that thrilled me.
Can I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
One thing, could you pull up that bottom in, I think it was like 06 or so?
Yeah.
And the reason I'm asking you to do that is it looked like there was very close to a broadening top that occurred right before. I didn't get the chance to count it down, but it looked awfully close. So I wanted to take a quick look.
Wow, the scale on this thing is so ridiculous. It's hard to do. Okay, let's see if I can do it this way and this way and this way and this way and bring it down here and this way and this way. Here we go.
All right.
Here. Make it bigger here. Okay, let's see what we got.
Good, yeah, so if you just start with that top right before where you're counting down the bottom, nope, right before, right there, here. 5 on that. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Easy. Yep, yeah. I didn't see that one, but you're absolutely right. For some reason, now, various securities, various things are more prone to throw these patterns in. Somebody's got to figure out why. I don't know what it is, but here is one that just over and over again has gotten you out of tops and bottoms. Here's the 5, 4, 3, 5, 4, 3, 2, and a 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 top, or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 top. Sorry about the scale. It's kind of like trying to work with Berkshire Hathaway over a long period of time. It's just the movements are just too big. In any case, there it is. That's all I was wondering. So yeah, that's good to see.
4, 3, 2, 1. Very nice. Okay, great. Okay, let's take a look at Newmont mining. Now, Newmont is one of the largest at the time. It was the largest gold mining company in the world. A little perspective. I'm going to pull up gold real quick. That would be commodities XAU. And those of you that followed the metals knows here's the bottom, all-time bottom since 1972 or 73. This is $265 basically. And then we start this huge bull run. Newmont's at the time was the largest, along with American Barracks, but basically the largest gold mining company in the world. And so you would expect somewhere in this period, 2001, 2, and 3, to be a bottom in Newmont, followed by a run that goes from basically $250 or $60 up to $1,900. We bought into gold as it broke through $300 and rode it basically all the way up, taking a little bit off the table at various times where we had flatness or weakness. But just like with the stock market over a long period of time, the trend was obvious, and Consensia would have kept you in. It was too early to be playing around with hyperwaves in the early stages, but after a while, things began to happen in terms of acceleration. But what I'm saying is we're about to look at Newmont Mine as an individual company going back to that beginning. So I am going to go to Seljen, and here's Newmont. Okay, so this is Newmont Mine, and you notice there's some weird stuff about this chart compared to what you just saw in the gold chart. But in any case, I wanted to show you at the bottom, after a tremendous drop in Newmont shares, and going back earlier, you can see that Newmont shares back in the late 80s was at $81. This peak was $60. And then as the gold market continued lower, Newmont dropped all the way down to, shoot, that's weird how that does that. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, good enough. All the way down to $12 a share. And it was preceded by a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, catching the very bottom. And the question is, at what point you get in? What we just saw on the Amazon chart, I believe it was the Amazon chart that Socrates was talking about, in which you get a 5 and then a lower 5. This is a 5 here. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a 5 because it's lower than the 1 and the 3. And if we blow it up, you'll see that there will be a point in there somewhere. These are weekly charts, by the way, right here, in which this is the 5 because it is lower than the candle to the left of it and the right of it. So you put a 5 in there, you buy wherever you buy, and we'll show you 2 or 3 or 4 different ways of doing that. Now, take a look at the Seljen lines. Seljen's saying you don't want to touch this thing. It's in a full bear market. This is a 5. You get into it, there's a stop that happens to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks out that goes like this, and then it drops down like that. And but as soon as you get lower than your 5, then you start looking for another 5. That's not a 5, that's not a 5. Here's a 5. That's the lowest point. It's even lower than these two down here. So this becomes your 5. and then you're going to put a stop below that. If you keep on going down, you get stopped out, and then you've got to do it again. You don't get stopped out. It catches the lowest point of the move, which in this case was a drop from 28 bucks down to 12 bucks. So it drops over 50% in a fairly short period of time. So that was interesting to me. What I'm trying to do is going back and finding big highs and big lows in many different markets and matching them up with the rules. Let's just take a quick look here. This is a 5. Down here would be a 4. This is a 3. This is a 2. This is a 5. This is a 4. This is a 3. This is a 2. And this might be a 1. This high on this candle is, oh shoot, kill me. Where did it go? I think I was doing it from here. 5, 4, 3. It was these two candles. This one is a high of 65.50. This one is a high of 65.17. So this is a high. So you've got a 5, 4, 3. Now the question is the 2 and the 1. This is a clear 2. So we got to find a 1. So the question is this a 1? And the answer is yes. This is a 1. It's clearly higher than the one on the left and the right. So you've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I even caught this high before a drop from $70 all the way down to below 20. And I can tell you right now that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, close, but you're stopped out down in here somewhere. And then you have a low, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You would have a low down here, and then you would get stopped out of that low somewhere coming down here to a much, much lower low. Anyway, I thought that one was very interesting. Those are historical. And I spent from the late 1970s all the way through a lot of things using this system on major trends in all markets. But I have to admit that I have not been keeping up with this in the recent couple of years because I've been so focused on Hyperwave, crypto, and Bitcoin and the US stock market using other tools that were working very nicely for me. Until we decided to do this, I haven't spent this much time going over these things. So let's take a look at one that's going on right now.
If you could,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
If you could really quickly pull that last chart up. There was
sure.
I just noticed right before you closed it, and I'm wondering, did we just get a recent broadening top on that most recent
right
action?
Here?
I was trying to. No, just very recently. This last move. Here? Yeah.
Well, let's see. This is the high.
Yeah, that's the 5.
5, 4. That's the 3. No, this is the 3. The high here is 35.18. The high here is 35.08. Yeah, 35.18. So you've got a 5, 4, 3. So now you look for a 2. There's the 2.
There.
And then that looks like that high is 33.70. And this one is 33.65. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it caught this top also. Now here, this is interesting. We haven't given you the details, but what happens is we're going to go over 5 weeks. and then start down at an angle that we will describe why and how with stops. And this would not have stopped you out. I can picture it. I've done this before. It'll come down like that. So in any case, you are going to find these all over the place. I don't know why. I think it's this macro climate that has got bulls and bears fighting with each other at tops and bottoms until one finally gives way. And the one that is giving way ends up to be the end point of a Seljen or a Megaphone or a broadening top or bottom. Okay, here is Qualcomm. A lot of people have been trying to trade Qualcomm. I didn't realize this. I wish I had earlier, because that was a 5, and you can see what's going on now. We haven't, the stops aren't even in place, but they're going to be up here basically, and they'll run for 5 weeks. We're only in the 4th week, then they're going to start down. And what you'll find when we show you how and when to use the stops is how ridiculously, almost embarrassingly accurate they are of getting you out of trouble. Nothing is perfect, obviously. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just, you know, as clear as anybody can spot it when you know what you're looking for. The tendency is not to look for it. Now you can do megaphones. That's fairly obvious, you know, here that something weird is going on because things are getting higher and higher and lower. That's the clue you want. If you switch to monthlies, as I said before, that's a great starting point because you can quickly see these up and down patterns on a longer time frame. But I have always traded the weekly, as I do on Hyperwave, and I use the same on Consensio. It's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. That's why I like it that so many of you in our Telegram groups, and what attracted me to Socrates's use of some of these systems is exploring and experimenting on your own. I want to teach you the basics, the pattern, give you many examples, tell you what problems I've found, what opportunities I have found. But these should all be starting places for everybody. On Hyperwaves, on Consensio, we've got another one coming up. It's the most complicated of all of them. I call it Capital Market Quanta. We might not even do that this year because we got enough going on. Everybody's trying to learn all these different things. And obviously, you can use all of them together in different ways at different times. Socrates loves experimenting with EMAs. I don't. I just go to, you know, the simple things that I've used forever and ever. They work very well for me. But I'm convinced that a lot of the things that some of you are finding are additive to the systems. But you've got to make it your own. That's if you're interested in, first of all, learning the system and then experimenting with it. We've got a bunch of people that are doing just that, and not only having a lot of fun, some of them are making an awful lot of money, some just using the pure system as it stands, but others are experimenting and coming up with questions and variations that I frankly have never thought about, never looked into. What about putting this with that? What about this and that? And that's what this is all about. You know, I know there's a bunch of people, trolls out there that don't believe that, but that's what we're doing, why we're doing it. And I think this next webinar on June the 1st, you're going to find very, very helpful. I hope you've already found just the concept helpful. How many of you have heard or read about megaphone patterns, or seen Peter Brandt show a megaphone pattern, or somebody's talking about a broadening top, and you can kind of see what they're saying, but you're not sure what to do with it? what should become clear, or should becoming more and more clear, is how powerful these things are. I do not know the reason why. I don't know why Edwards and McGee saw them and understood them to be what they were back in the 1940s, and then just used it for stocks. And then Wells Wilder just used it for commodities, basically. I think he played around with some currencies too. Larry Williams only created sequential for the commodity market, but he did trade bond futures and currency futures with it. And then that's when Tom DeMark really built it into what it is today, mainly with the interest rate market, the bond market. Anyway, so that's what we wanted to talk about today. We wanted to give you 3, 4, 5 examples, some historical, some current. We looked at the dollar, we looked at the euro, we looked at Qualcomm, we looked at some historical things with Amazon, which would be very interesting to start examining tops in all of these stocks that Hyperwave is questioning. Are you on a 3 or a 4? What a greater way to put an exclamation point on analysis like Consensio or Hyperwave in terms of a timing tool, if you also can find that this is a broadening top or a bottom. I think it's a great time to be learning these skills because of where we are with world markets right now. And with that, Socrates, anything you want to add?
I think that was covered all very well, and not much to add there. Looks like we do have a few minutes. You want to take a quick look at Bitcoin?
Yeah, great. Good idea. You want to pull it up?
Sure, I can do that.
Yeah, we had dropped down pretty nastily. What's fascinating to me, a bunch of people started extending the phase 2 line on the weekly Bitcoin. And by gosh, if it hasn't held it for some weird reason, I'll take a look at that in just a second, but go ahead.
All right, I can pull that up here shortly for you. So yesterday we took a look at this trend line here, and I mentioned that I was watching closely to see if it broke down, and if it did, I was expecting a big move to continue down to basically about the 62 to 6,500 area, I believe. Might be looking a little bit at 66 as well. And right now, so we broke down the trend line on this candle, clearly closed below it, and then we bounce right back. So now it is very interesting to me to see, is this just a throwback to retest this trend line for resistance? If so, then it is probably the best selling opportunity, is in my opinion, is when you break down a trend line and then throw back to retest it. So that is going to be a confluence of resistance from here, from the prior horizontal that was holding it up for support at 78, which gave us this inverse head and shoulders, cup and handle type of situation. So now that should be turning into resistance. So we're basically throwing back to retest 78.15, which to 78.56, which is going to be a potential support turning resistance from, oh geez, I just realized I'm not on screen share. Well, somebody messaged me.
I think you were.
All right, you can see it. It says I am, so I will keep going.
I can see it.
Great.
That's all that matters.
That's all that matters. So we can see that potential support turning resistance from this trend line, as well as previous horizontal support here at 78. So right before we kind of got cut off yesterday, there was one thing that I was going to point out to basically see what can be confirmation of breaking down, and that is the 9 and the 200 EMA on the, excuse me, the 9 and the 50 EMA on the 4-hour. I think I just figured out what the problem was. So if you guys could not see my screen, I apologize for that. I think I just figured it out. So we're looking at this trend line here, broke down, thrown back to retest, and then we're looking at this area here at 78 that was support, and now it is throwing back to retest that as well. So hopefully you can see that now. And yesterday, what I wanted to kind of touch on was this crossover of the 9 and the 50 EMA that is on the 4-hour chart. Notice here, the last time we came down to test this trend line, we fell below the 50 EMA, but we didn't stay there for very long at all, not long enough to get this crossover here. So that is what I've been keeping my eye on here as kind of a confirmation that this area really did break down and it wasn't just a fake out or some sort of shakeout, is if we're able to stay under the 50 EMA on the 4-hour chart for long enough to have this crossover here with the 9. So that will be interesting to see. As we can see, we kind of have this similar action here where we fall below, we close below for a couple candles, and boom, we pop right back up. So right, again, kind of the same thing that I concluded yesterday was that we're right on the verge of some big action if we're able to remain above this 50 EMA on the 4-hour chart and potentially work our way back above this trend line and above the 78 horizontal, then we could potentially see this similar action that we got in here. Whereas if that doesn't happen, if this, we can see it has been wicking off of this trend line here, and it's shying away from the 7,800 area. So if it can't close above there and does get back below this 50 EMA for a second time, then I would be looking for that crossover to come. And that could happen, you know, basically in the blink of an eye. One candle shoots down here and you get the crossover. But that, you know, is something that can obviously happen in the volatile markets, but it can be a good confirmation to watch for in terms of did this really break down, or are we just getting some sort of fake out? So that is what I have been watching, and I will going to pull up the phase 2 trend line to take a look at. I think I know what Tyler was talking about. So let's see here. We had one break right around there. We would have drawn 2 right through that close, and boom.
Yeah, a bunch of people have pointed that out to me, and it's got me rethinking some things. My view is when a phase line breaks like the 3 broke, then it disappears. When the 2 was broken at 6,000, then it disappears. I still believe that to be true. And what I'm talking about, if we do get above it, I don't consider it a phase line, but it certainly is a very long angular trend line. So even though a phase line is also a trend line, not all trend lines are phase lines, but all phase lines are trend lines. And once a phase line is broken, then to me, I'm very interested in, at this time, the way we've gone for 2 weeks now with the tops just hanging right around that area and then this sell-off below it. I don't have much to say about that. I've got to think about it a lot more, see if I can find any other examples like that. We've looked at General Electric where it's gone almost all the way down, then comes way, way up. So obviously it's breaking through old 2s and 3s. But this is very interesting to me. Secondly, a lot of people are talking about this as being a mini hyperwave from this bottom at 3,100. I never heard of or thought about a mini hyperwave, but I am not discounting what some people are finding, not only in Bitcoin, but in some other things with the same pattern over a fairly short period of time, where it starts accelerating up off of a base. Now, the base isn't going to go on for years, and the phase lines are going to be very, very short, but I guess that's what the word mini means. That's going to take a lot more work. I'm not ready to call them that, because to me, I'm not sure that a short or a mini hyperwave is got the same qualitative things building up in it that normal hyperwaves do relative to macroeconomic events. Now you can say, well, if you've got a big macroeconomic event that caused a big hyperwave, isn't it also possible that same macroeconomic event could cause mini hyperwaves or fractal hyperwaves or nested hyperwaves within another structure? Yeah, we already know that's true, but definitionally, I don't want to get too sloppy in terms of throwing the terms around, because then it just confuses everybody. And I'm not discounting it, believe me. I think it's very interesting. We'll see what happens here. Is this possible? We had a 2, 3, maybe an accelerated 4, 5, a 6, and if we don't go higher, we go back down into a 7. That would be kind of exciting. But who knows? That's an open question to me.
Yep, very, very interesting. I've definitely been keeping my eye on this as well, and just kind of seeing these accelerating trend lines. I think maybe doesn't have the same macroeconomic implications or requirements as normal hyperwaves, but I think it does. It's kind of a fractal or a microcosm of the overall emotions that are apparent in hyperwaves. When you get these accelerating trend lines, to me, what it represents is kind of like a belief, and then a high confidence, and then like a euphoria. Every time those trend lines kind of accelerate at a higher angle, that is telling me that the market is over exuberant, and it's getting even more so when it starts to accelerate at a higher angle. So basically up in here, I think people were feeling a lot of kind of the same things to a much smaller degree that they felt back in 2017. Definitely, when it happens in a shorter time frame, it's not as intense, or it's maybe a little easier to remember where it came from and to not get too over rational. However, I do think that seeing these accelerating trend lines is showing that this market is very exuberant, and it is basically kind of maybe getting ahead of itself just a little bit in terms of everybody's thinking the bear market is over, and that's what I think is the highest probability. But when everybody starts thinking that and gets kind of overwhelmed with euphoria and excitement, that is what, in my opinion, leads to these sort of accelerating trend lines. And while I don't necessarily think it follow the same rules, I find it super interesting to see it increasing at such a such a fast rate. So that is definitely something that I've been keeping my eye on, that I think is very interesting, and hopefully it doesn't take me too long. But the other thing I've been kind of noticing is that they have both been kind of these broadening sort of channels. It's like almost an acceleration. Instead of phase lines, we've almost got these broadening channels that have been occurring, which is a bullish continuation pattern defined by Thomas Bulkowski. So this is kind of what I was watching here, was seeing that this trend line that I was showing you guys today and yesterday, that was actually kind of part of this second broadening channel that was going. This was coming at a, you know, fairly steady rate, and then once we broke through the top of it, it just shot up very quickly. So I was kind of wondering, is maybe this kind of like a phase 2 broadening channel, and maybe this is our phase 3, and if we break through the top of this, then it's just going to blow everybody's minds, was kind of one thing that I was wondering, and seeing this now breaking down is definitely decreasing that possibility for me. But like we said, this could just potentially be a fake out. So definitely a lot of interesting things happening with Bitcoin right now, and I'm glad that we got the chance to discuss it.
Well, another thing to consider, and for those of you in Telegram or are doing it on your own, consider drawing the phase 2 line on this mini hyperwave from the breakout, not at the top of the breakout. So if you draw your phase 1 in again, and then at that point is where your 2 is going to start. So put your 2 from there to the first touch point and extend that. I suspect, that's all it is I'm suspecting that sharp drop we had of $2,000 from 8,200 down didn't really break anything. In fact, it didn't even get back to the phase 2 line. And I would also think that we're so far above the phase 2 line that we might have not have even started a phase 3. And that if we drop down to, let's say, the low 6s, then that would be an interesting phase 3 angle that we could start up from again and maybe go much, much higher. So I'm just kind of laying out one bullish interpretation of what I see here. And sometimes when these things are moving so fast, we try to think that this is a 1, 2, 3. It might simply be an acceleration above a 1 after that breakout into a 2, and now the 2's gone way above itself, and it's too early to tell if it's even in a 3 yet. If we come back to the 2 at some later time, let's just pick, in the summer right there, somewhere in the low 6s, it's still in a phase 2, and now it begins to feel more like, okay, maybe this is something that's really building into something bigger. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Nope, I didn't have anything else. I was just kind of illustrating what you were describing, and yeah, that's very, very interesting. Taking a look at it like that, and maybe even it has showed that angle back in here, something like that. If you don't necessarily use the exact
vertex, yeah,
hyper, potentially starting it from right in here would be a little bit of confirmation of that same angle. So yeah, that's very, very interesting stuff. So before we sign off, and while I still have my screen shared, I was going to pull up the website really quickly to show people how to register for the webinar if they like. So here on the home screen, go to products and webinars, and that will take you to a, let's see here. We see here at the top, June 1st, 2019, 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Seljen trading system, price is 0.01 BTC or $150. If you're not available at this exact time, it will be recorded and you can watch it at a later date. It would be best if you can be there so that you can ask questions after we're done presenting. If you click on the details, it will give you an overview of what we will be covering and kind of who helped him set up this system. So that is how you would go to register if you are interested in signing up for the upcoming webinar. And that was everything that I wanted to go over. And
terrific. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Socrates. Thanks, everybody, for listening and learning. That's what we're here to do, is to try to teach, give you tools that you can carry around in a toolbox, not for right now with Bitcoin, not for the next 6 months, for the rest of your lives. Once you've learned these things, you know them. And then it's up to you to use them, experiment with them, try, see, understand, make mistakes, correct those mistakes, and you will be well on your way to becoming a super investor. Thank you very much. Thanks, Socrates.
My pleasure. Thank you. Have a good one, everybody.